Hello, is this AT&T? I'd like to talk to you about the Snyder Cut. Yeah, we're all battling to get the Snyder Cut released, the real cut of Justice League by the brilliant Zack Snyder. Do you have any updates from Warner Brothers Pictures for me? They're going to release it. Wow, this is awesome. When? The sooner the better. Hold up. Are you humouring me? Hello? Is this thing on? Welcome back to Big Mouth, and fancy seeing you here, and you are very welcome, my friends, and especially my enemies. Welcome to Thursday's edition of the dceu Daily, and this is a massive one because John Aaron Garza himself has written an amazing article about the Snyder Cut and about how AT&T really feel about it. So with no further ado, I'm going to read it with you right now. Here's the header. Here's what AT&T really think about the Snyder Cut of Justice League. Are you ready for this? This is a great article. I've read it through very quickly. Not the whole thing, but it is really, there's some things in here that none of us knew, and it really is amazing. So shall we begin? If you've ever been a kid in your life, which we will have, of course, or currently have one, then you're more than likely played the quiet game when you were younger, a game that encourages the loudest of us to remain silent. Yeah, shall be rewarded. Only what happens if there are no goods to be earned? What happens if those shunned for making ruckus would actually be rewarded for not being quiet? Ah yes, that brings me to the infamous Snyder Cut of Justice League. Sure, its pop culture status has reached a new height when it was spoken in a Game of Thrones language of High Valyrian, but that's about as much as anyone close to Warner Brothers Studios has ever come to the acknowledgement of such a thing. And really, it wasn't the studio, but the creator of the language. So there's that. But the plot thickens, especially after writing my own timeline of events that led to this self-inflicted catastrophe. The unseen Aquaman footage. In case you missed it, I recently uncovered some never-before-seen footage of Aquaman from Justice League with the ability to find it out on the interwebs. That was evidence enough for me to properly give it the respect it deserved. So I did what I do best and created a small insignificant reel of the missing 3-second scene mixed with the actual footage. And so what happens? DMCA claims everywhere. Claims that said I had somehow stolen this unrelated footage of Justice League and it needed to be removed immediately. That was shocking though. Was that my video was taken down from every single site that I had uploaded it to? This has never been the case with any of my videos on YouTube, much less Twitter, so naturally I did what any sane person in my field would do. I asked the person responsible why. Of course, they responded just like everything else Warner Brothers has said about the Snyder Cut, with no response. But I was able to get in contact with another person close to the studio, and this is what I found. Justice League was in a precarious position. It was in its final stages of completion when AT&T was about to finalise its purchase of the very film studio responsible for distribution. But like any enterprise, when under new management, there's always a slight duplication of efforts, most of it being a complete waste of time. But it needs to be done nevertheless. So AT&T took a step back and allowed Warner Brothers to do what they do best, or so they thought. A warning for all of you would-be warriors out there that I've been told isn't for the faint of heart. AT&T is a conglomerate concern with one thing: profit. Warner Brothers is in the movie-making business for that exact same thing. Anything that gets in the way of that purpose for either company is dealt with and handled with accordingly. And I was told that any footage of a film they want to be forgotten is being shut down retroactively. Little by little, they're finding ways to quiet the annoyance, or so they see it as. The fandom. We've all seen the Release the Snyder Cut hashtag on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram. I made a video about the movement, and other fans have come together to make more videos encouraging Warner Brothers to release Snyder's cut of Justice League. But within the fandom, petitions and who gets the credit has splintered a once semi-organised movement, and AT&T has noticed that as well. So much so that they've almost allowed us to implode on ourselves. They've noticed, and it's moved the needle, albeit slightly, and not in the direction we'd want. With the infighting and the justifications of spoiling future DC films, the fandom is once again looking like the villains of our own story. And because Warner Brothers hasn't released Justice League, things have gotten out of hand. The source I've talked to, who's close with Warner Brothers, has inferred that the studio wants us to fight a war amongst ourselves. Forget the $200 million that was budgeted for the film. Forget the $100 million extra that got added on because of the Whedon reshoots. The fans will prove, as they always have, that money talks. But that happens when you actually take into account what can be generated if they release the Snyder Cut. Things become thick and milky. Excuse me? We as a fandom have done some pretty spectacular things, but we've also done some questionable things from my source. So this is from John Aaron Garza's source. So listen carefully to this, because this is very revealing, and this actually confirms my suspicions from the very beginning. Telephone operators at Warner Brothers have been told what to do with the abundance of phone calls about the Snyder Cut. Their memo to the unfortunate assistants: you're not the decision maker, nor do you know the inner workings of the studio. Tell them what they want to hear. Treat it as you would a crank call. Wow, wow, wow. I think we need to repeat this. Now, this is when I was hearing reports about all these people ringing up and kind of the assistant saying, or whoever they were speaking to, yeah, it's going to happen, and all of that, I thought, I was talking about it on the DCEU Daily, but in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, come off it, this is ridiculous. Why would they know anything? And in fact, a couple of people have even been raising money from other DCEU fans to get these assistants actually who answer the phones flowers and gifts. So how do people in the movement feel about that now? Pretty dumb, I would think. Right, let's repeat this again. Telephone operators at Warner Brothers have been told what to do with the abundance of phone calls about the Snyder Cut. Their memo to the unfortunate assistants: you're not the decision maker, nor do you know the inner workings of the studio. Tell them what they want to hear and treat it as you would a crank call. Actually, if you're Warner Brothers and you don't want to deal with us and you don't want to cause discourse, this is exactly what you would do. In fact, as immoral as this is, it's a smart business move. Yet we treat their words as official announcements, which is ridiculous, of course, from the studio when it couldn't be further from the truth. And what about others showing their disdain for films after the butchery of Justice League? I'm all for people to enjoy and watch whatever they feel like, but to ruin films for other DC fans that have no control over your anger towards the studio isn't a proper way to handle the situation. That's absolutely spot on, John. I asked, would a studio want to please a vocal minority actively ruining their films? Their answer: they won't. Of course they won't. And, a lot of the agenda against kind of Shazam saying it's not making money by certain people on YouTube and on Twitter, by the way. And, this just shows how stupid those people are. And I totally agree with John. So why would a studio want to invest more money in a $300 million flop? If it can generate money, they'll listen. Right, so we know that already. But can it generate the money they want? That's the problem. They don't know. The only issue with that last answer is that the film lost money that can't be made back with ticket sales anymore. It's a way to hold a carrot in front of our eyes without realising we don't even like carrots. How can a film generate more money without getting released in theatres? That's a question for another time. Now, I think this is an interesting question, and John should have covered it. There is a potential to release this film, right, in a limited way in theatres. Now, it can't make $1 billion, but let's just say Justice League made just over 650, right? Let's say this film, let's go Dreamland here. Let's say this film makes 300, 400 million. Potentially, it could. There's a lot of interest for the Snyder Cut. This film totally would have got up to $1 billion. It is actually worth their while. I know marketing costs a lot of money. It costs a lot of money to finish this film. I think potentially the Snyder Cut could make a little bit more money. for Warner Bros. And plus, the PR and the marketing would be brilliant. But here's the problem. And, before I go back to read the final part of this article, which I think is wonderful, by the way, the problem is the Snyder Cut version of Justice League is a billboard of Warner Brothers' biggest mistake in their history. They thought they could get a magic wand and turn the DCEU into Marvel, and it failed. And they had to sack Kevin Sujihara because of that. They didn't sack him because he was up to no good with a woman and giving her roles for sex. No, because this happens every day in Hollywood. Why am I saying that? Because I know, because I'm part of the entertainment industry, and I know how vile women are treated in this industry, and how everyone is just treated well until you give them what they want. So basically, we get that. But I absolutely believe that this film could make some money for Warner Brothers, but it's all about marketing now. But as I say, the problem is they don't want to advertise their mistakes. They're being stupid. They're making a mistake. They're being stubborn. Releasing this film has no negative results. So basically, I'm just getting my background back because I lose my mojo without it. So how to win. The studio was rumoured to have hired Ben Fritz from the Wall Street Journal to write a hit piece aimed specifically at fans of the Snyder Cut. That should be evidence enough that they've taken notice to us. But I would also told that they thought that they would just go away. And with the wild words on Twitter every week, they may just prove themselves right. Think about it from their perspective. All they have to do is wait it out until the toxic fan base consumes everything like a virus, pushing even those that want to see away. And it damn near has. I don't know about that, to be honest. I don't agree with that, John. But what they couldn't foresee was certain advocates infiltrating in major ways. You may not know who they are, but they know you, and like Pandora's box, things are opening in several different areas. They've managed to stay hidden long enough to gain access to the behind-the-scenes details. And again, what I've found can be looked at positively or negatively. Money talks. From what my sources told me, ATaT CEO Randall Stevenson and Warner Media Group CEO John Stankey love a good investment. I was told before Snyder left, a lot of the VFX were finished and Junkie's score was done. Now that doesn't mean it's 99% done, but they did know something I was aware of some months ago, that it wasn't, unfortunately. Matted to the final picture, therefore, was never scored properly. I also confirmed that even in the 214-minute runtime, some previs is in place for certain scenes. What they are, I do not know. What I do know, however, is that it exists. His cut is real, and they know it. Well, to be honest, Zach's pretty much said that already, so that is not a big revelation, John. But let's use some simple figures, shall we? In order to finalise said cut, they say figures have floated around in the realm of 40 million. That will finish the necessary VFX and final sound to complete the film as originally intended. And then let's just say that 200,000 fans are all in support of the Snyder Cut on Twitter Vero. Multiply that number by $20 for a single movie ticket, and you get 4 million in revenue. Let's double that for Blu-ray purchases, and we're now at 8 million. Pretty good, eh? Well, not really, since that doesn't factor in the cost of the overseas return being higher than in America. Mainly the China box office, and also that the film won't be released in theatres like a normal theatrical release. I digress. Brass tacks. If you were AT&T and judged every investment on its merits, what decision would you make? The fans asked for the Snyder Cut, and while you do not doubt their honesty or intention, you understand they represent a fraction of your target audience. But before you add another 40 million to finish the film, you have to handle the 200 million that would have been paid out to the original actors involved that weren't paid from the 100 million from Whedon's reshoots. So in truth, you have to invest even more for the legality purposes for films you're not going to release in theatres. Forgive me, but I wouldn't make an investment based on the wishes and dreams of fans that have no intention of further support of future DC films. Yeah, John, you see where you're going wrong, mate. You don't know that. If people are energised by this, when they get it, they'll be excited for DC films. There will be no agenda anymore. So I don't agree with you there, John. While I admire the passion the fandom has, 8 million does not equate to 40 million. And in business, I trust in logic, not passion. Banners and phone calls pleasant though. Is it? Do not equal revenue to the oversee of a company who's only interested in profit margins. All companies are only interested in profit margins, mate. So I was told that in order for them to take us seriously, we need to grow the market for the Snyder Cut and prove that they would be foolish not to release it. But that's the $40 million question, isn't it? Simple math. Well, I can't do math, mate, so the math is never simple for me. We can make Warner Brothers 8 million, so some have assumed you can cost them enough to make it worthwhile. But the same math applies there. First, not all 200,000 will boycott future films. But even if they did, we're taking 0.2% impact on the film like Shazam. That's the lowest grossing film in the DC Extended Universe. Thanks, we already know. Because you lot keep on telling us. Box office as of right now. And why 200, is it 200,000? I can't even read numbers anymore. Well, that's the number of people that signed the petition, actually more like 180,000, but I'm rounding it up. And since we haven't managed to provide a survey or petition with more than that, they have no reason to believe we're bigger than that number. We're the molehill that thinks it's a mountain, but we're still getting stepped over. And before people say the 200,000 fans would see the film 5 times, no, they wouldn't, because it's not getting a theatrical release. You don't know that. You don't know it's not going to get a theatrical release. But the thing is, it's not being released at this moment, so we don't know what the possibilities are. But I'll digress to him, because what the point he's coming to, really, the Snyder Cut kind of movement needs to get bigger. It's not big enough, and I've kind of suspected this for some time. No, they wouldn't, because it's not getting a theatrical release. So the argument is a farce. Don't agree. Prove it to the studio. Proving to me you can make them 40 million is redundant. What will it achieve? But proving to Warner Brothers you can make more than 40 million is a horse of different colour. That puts them above break even. Now there's a financial investment worth looking at if we solely focused on the 40 million figure. So what's next? How can we prove a market exists for their upcoming product and still fight for the Snyder Cut? I don't have that answer, but I know that yelling at people won't get us any closer to a release. I agree with that, John. Maybe if we figure out how to survey more than just our inner circle, we may make contact with a bigger influencer that can help spread the word. What is AT&T and Warner Brothers observing now? They're clearly taking anything down that is remotely tied to the Snyder Cut, which indicates it's sensitive material to them. But that doesn't seem to be enough to coax them into releasing anything else for us, or even make it known we exist. Why isn't that enough? What does Warner Brothers and AT&T need in order to change their impression of our fandom? We know that kicking and screaming don't work. Otherwise, the constant harassment to Warner Media's Twitter would have given us the cut already. But we also know that they're silencing us for a reason. So can the fandom provide a different impression without viciously attacking people that are clearly not the decision makers? I don't have the answer either, but I was told that billboards don't help AT&T's bottom line, and that's a scary thing. It shows support to a director, which I'm all for. It doesn't, however, show how much AT&T gains in revenue if they release the Snyder Cut of Justice League. Basically, this is a really, really thought out article by John Aaron Garza, and he's been a big voice supporter of the Snyder Cut for a long time. He's a great guy. He's clearly really intelligent. There's a couple of bits, as you saw and heard, that I didn't agree with, but mostly I do agree with him. So it's actually, it kind of makes you think in a way, and it's kind of a bit, I suppose, sad, because you realise that what we've been doing isn't even, isn't a kick in the ocean. Is it really? That we've done really well. We have. And I mean, when I say we, you guys out there are doing all the work. I mean, I try and spread the word. But what Chris Wong Spencer are doing, John Aaron Garza, Fiona, all these different people are doing a great job. But you also know I'm not just here to forward the word of the Snyder Cut. I'm a big Superman fan. I love DC films. I will continue to support the DCEU. And that's the end of it. But I want to see this film. But what I think, this is brilliant. This shouldn't be seen as a negative. This is a great article. He's telling you we have to become bigger. Basically what he's saying to you, we have to prove to Warner Brothers and AT&T that this film can make over $40 million. How do we do that? We have to be bigger. We have to be bigger. Now, so how do we become bigger? We need to target movie fans with big followers. So big followers on Instagram, loads of followers on Instagram, verified, also high profile directors. Instead of just tagging kind of Zack Snyder, which is pointless, or Warner Brothers or AT&T, tag high profile directors on Instagram and Twitter. You might get their support, you might not. But the whole thing is to find a tactic to get other movie fans to embrace this movement so it gets so big, it gets globally big, and then Warner Brothers and AT&T see it and they say, bloody hell, there's a reason to do this. Let's do this. We've got to become bigger. We've got to target the mainstream audience. Well, I've said this to you on here so many times. And if we can do that and convince them that a bigger audience will come in, we will get a cinematic release. This will be massive. This will be the biggest turnarounds in movie history, and that's what we've got to do. But you've heard something else from John Aaron Garza, that basically a billboard doesn't really convince them to do anything. All it does is support the director. Now, again, we've had kind of fundraising schemes for the presents and the flowers for the assistants at AT&T and Warner Brothers, but also people are raising money for the billboards. So, thousands have already been donated for that. So I assume it's going to happen. I don't think it's a bad thing to do billboards and things are going across the sky, because you know what that does? No, it doesn't convince Warner Brothers. It doesn't convince AT&T, but the public see it. The mainstream movie-going public see it. It could capture their imagination. And that, my friends, is how we get bigger.